Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I have the great pleasure to introduce our guest of honor tonight, Hubert Joly. I would just like maybe to say 2 or 3 words before to say how important it is for me to be here tonight. I'm also a former student of Sciences Po, a school that I have loved and that I continue to cherish, and I think it's very important that we have these events and that we continue to support the development of the school. Working at BNP Paribas, we are one of the sponsors of Sciences Po in different ways, a little bit here, but also we have been sponsoring the Bruno Latour Research Center as well. And as Matthias has been saying in the introduction, research is fundamental, and we absolutely need to continue to fund research as being private firm. And especially research to help us try to live in a world that is based a little bit more on facts and science than what we can sometimes see and deplore. So with that, I'm going to introduce our guest of honor, Hubert Joly. So Hubert is a senior lecturer at the Harvard Business School. He's also the former chairman and chief executive officer of Best Buy. He's a member of the board of directors of Johnson & Johnson and of Ralph Lauren Corporation, a member of the International Advisory Board of HEC in Paris, and a trustee of the New York Public Library and the Minneapolis Institute of Art. Hubert has been ranked as one of the top 100 CEOs in the world by the Harvard Business Review, one of the top 30 CEOs in the world by Barron's, and one of the top management thinkers in the world by Thinkers 50. And he received the organization's 2021 Leadership Award. So many awards. I mean, we have a huge gap if we look where we are today on our side. He's also the author of the best-selling and highly acclaimed book, The Heart of Business, Leadership Principles for the Next Era of Capitalism. And I have the pleasure to ask him a few questions about his book and his views in a very interesting context we are living in today. Hubert, can I join you?
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't know if our mics are working. I hope so.
I think they are.
Yes.
Otherwise, we have the Geek Squad that's here. Hello, Best Buy. By the way, so small infomercial. This is the holiday shopping season. There's a table from Best Buy who are ready to take orders, install this big screen TV at your home. Would the Best Buy table please stand up?
I think the first question we would like to ask you, especially after all the awards that I've been listing, I mean, you're highly decorated, is what are can you share with us the moments in your career, in your impressive career, that have shaped the leader you became and where you are today and what has been driving you?
Well, thank you, and let me start by saying it's a great honor to be recognized here. I'm also a Sciences Po alumnus, so Matthias, thank you for everything the school has given me. And yes, your words were words of wisdom, so appreciate very much what you're doing and the journey you're on. So big round of applause for you. So 100% of leaders were born, but nobody was born a leader. And so over time, we all grow to become leaders. For me, there was a few important milestones along the way. I won't tell you my entire life story, but I'd like to highlight maybe a couple of milestones. One was about 20 years ago. To quote David Brooks, in many ways I was at the top of my first mountain. I'd been a partner with Russ at McKinsey & Company. I'd been on the executive team of Vivendi Universal. So in many ways I'd been quite successful. Except when I was at the top of my first mountain, there was no taste, there was no joy. And probably that was because I had been too driven by power, fame, glory, or money. And that may be good for some people, but it was not good for me. And so that led me to step back and think about what is my purpose in life? What is my calling? So I ended up doing the spiritual exercises of Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, of course, to revisit my life story and try to discern what was my calling in life. So that was the first milestone. The second milestone was in 2009. I was the CEO of Carlson Companies at the time in Minneapolis. And my head of HR, Elizabeth Bastoni, walks into my office one day and she says, "Hubert, would you like to work with a coach?" I said, "Has somebody complained? Have I done something wrong?" Because at the time, in many ways, coaching was remedial. And she said, no, you've done nothing wrong. There's this guy, Marshall Goldsmith, who helps successful leaders get better. Some of his clients include Alan Mulally, the CEO of Ford, a few years ago, Dr. Jim Kim, the president of the World Bank. And I said, "Oh, sign me up." And at the time, I was struggling. Maybe raise your hand if anybody in the room struggles with, is a perfectionist. Raise your hand. Matthias, you're not a perfectionist? Good, you're cured. I was suffering from that disease. And that meant anytime I would get feedback, I liked the positive feedback. I would discount it, but I would still like it. But the other feedback, not so much. I was struggling with it. And so what Marshall allowed me to discover is the concept of feed forward. What can I get better at? So when I play tennis, I like to play with a pro, right? And the pro helps me improve my forehand. And in business, it's interesting. Athletes, Roger Federer has a coach, always has had a coach. In business, historically, we didn't have coaches. And so Marshall helped me work on that and embrace the concept of feed forward and asking for help. So my favorite phrase now as a leader is, "My name is Hubert and I need help."
Interesting. So when you took over Best Buy in 2012, the company was actually declining, the sales were dwindling. I mean, the perspectives were a little bit dire. And you have been, very successful in actually reversing that trend. How did you do it? Because we know that you used some unconventional, at that time, and probably still today, some unconventional leadership skills.
So you're generous to give me credit for the turnaround. I think we had about 125,000 people be involved in this. But I think the story is this. In 2012, when I became CEO, yes, everybody thought we were going to die. There was zero buy recommendation on the stock. That's how you know people think you're going to die. And when I asked the investors and the analysts for advice, they said, "Hubert, cut. You're going to have to close stores and fire a lot of people." And so we looked, closing stores. All of the stores were profitable, so it didn't seem like a good idea. And firing a lot of people, it sort of implies that people are the problem. And I think that's a bit of a disease. Many companies consider, people as a cost, as opposed to considering the people as an asset. And I had a different point of view. So the turnaround, we could describe what we did, and we ensured our prices were competitive. So if you buy from Best Buy, competitive prices, same price as Amazon. We invested in the online shopping experience, in the speed of shipping, in the experience in the stores. We partnered with all of the world's greatest tech companies that now showcase their products in our stores. And so that's the what. But more interesting was the how. And maybe that's a leadership lesson for me. As leaders, we often tend to focus on the what. Certainly I did. And it's more interesting to focus on the why and the how. And the how was the opposite of cut. It was a very human-centric approach to the turnaround. So it started with listening to the frontliners. So I spent my first week on the job working in a store in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I think they should say St. Cloud, but for some reason they say St. Cloud. And asking the frontliners, what's working, what's not working, what do you need? My job was simple. Ask the question, take notes, and do as I was told. They had all of the answers. It was also about reshaping the team at the top. And as relates to the turnaround itself, it was headcount reduction as a last resort. Oh, by the way, I learned a new word. I'm learning words every day. Heart count, as opposed to head count. it changes the perspective. So my view in a turnaround is headcount reduction or headcount reduction is the last resort. You start by increasing revenue. And if you're going to go after costs, it's all of the non-salary expenses, which at most companies is the bulk of the cost structure. And then it was about, mobilizing the team. One of the leadership lessons for me was that I thought that being the smartest person in the room was really important, coming up with the answer. I spent how many years at McKinsey, right? We learned to be smart, right? Russ and I got to know each other at McKinsey. That's overrated. Creating the right environment for others to be successful is the key to leadership. How do you do this? Is by co-creating the plan, by getting going. If the plan doesn't need to be perfect, you celebrate the small wins, and then you keep going. So these were some of the lessons. The reason I have scars on my face is because I learned these lessons along the way.
So we can definitely sense that this experience had probably nurtured what has become your book, The Heart of Business. Is there any other lessons that you would like to share with the audience? I mean, we may have many leaders or future leaders in the audience, so it could be useful for them.
I'm sure it's only leaders in the room, because at the minimum we're leaders of our lives, right? So everybody's a leader. Some of the leadership lessons, I think that leadership starts with figuring out who you are and who you want to be as a leader. So people now talk, and it's important to talk about corporate purpose. In France, it's raison d'être. But it starts with the foundation for corporate purpose, I think, is what's our personal purpose? The other lesson for me was, and certainly my years at Best Buy taught me this, at the end of the day, a business is a human organization made of individuals working together in pursuit of a goal. And that's what matters. So it's the idea of thinking about a company as a purposeful human organization driven by a noble or higher purpose. We have a Ralph Lauren table under the leadership of Patrice and Ralph, pursuing inspiring the dream of a better life. At Best Buy, it was enrich lives through technology. It's the idea of pursuing that noble purpose, putting people at the center, embracing all stakeholders, and treating profit as an outcome, not as the goal. I actually told our shareholders once, our purpose as a company is not to make money. Of course, the share price had gone from 11 to whatever, 70 or something like this, but it's an outcome. It's not the ultimate purpose of a company. And then the last thing is about leadership principles, this idea that, yes, the idea of the leader as the superhero who knows everything and tells other people what to do, not so effective. And so today, certainly during COVID, we're talking about this with Matthias, right? Who had the COVID manual? Who knew what to do? So now with all of the crises we're dealing with, it's become super easy to say, I don't know. We're going to have to figure this out together. So being clear about your purpose, your principles, and being driven by words that we never used to use in business, which words like authenticity, humility, empathy, humanity, have become important words. Okay. I'm sounding like I'm preaching. I bet everybody in the room, I'm telling you things you already know, so I apologize for this.
But so it's, very interesting and I think insightful for us to think that it can work and that it has been working for Best Buy and we would hope that it always works. Now, however, we are in a context where we're really facing, I would say, so many headwinds at the same time.
That's true.
If you look at, the trade tensions, the war, the energy shortages, the climate stress, the inflation, the populism, you've shared your values and what you think is meaningful. Do you think that leaders today can still really bet on those values to continue to drive their business in those circumstances? What's the recipe? Is there any, I would say, a recipe that you can give them in terms of attitude when there are such headwinds and the temptation is to make more the traditional type of move, which is reducing cost and adjusting?
Yeah, I think we've all learned so much in the last 2 or 3 years, right, about leadership in these very difficult times. I think a first lesson was, and we saw that at the beginning of COVID, when you couldn't go outside during COVID, you could go inside and reflect on what kind of a leader do I want to be. My wife who's here, who's an amazing executive leadership coach, voilà.
Wives are always important, and women in general.
Yes.
I just put it out there.
When she works with CEOs or senior executives, one of the questions or things she encourages them to do is to think of and write down their eulogy. How do you want to be remembered on that day where you're not here to listen anymore? And so how did we want to be remembered after COVID would be over? Is an important consideration. The second thing is, we're talking about this with a group of CEOs. One of the CEOs, CEO of a Fortune 50 company is saying, my raw materials are coming from Russia and China. My supply chain is a mess. There's inflation. We're getting into a recession. I don't know what to do. And after discussion, it felt that a way to navigate these difficult times is for teams to go back to the purpose. Why are we here? What need are we serving in the world? Go back to principles. What are the things in this chaotic world where everything is changing? What are the things that are not changing? You can call them principles or values. And then the third thing was, then you do your best. Recognizing that you actually don't control the outcome. In the old days, you would analyze the situation, you would develop a 5-year strategy or a 10-year strategy, and then you would hold yourself accountable to achieve these numbers. We have no idea what next year is going to be like. So the only thing you control is what you control, and you have to, that's one of the learnings for me, is that you control what you can control. You don't control the outcome, but you do your best in being the best leader you can be.
So difficult for me not to ask you about your views on what has just happened in the past days with Elon Musk taking over Twitter and starting by laying
Lisa,
off
do you want to
half
comment?
of the staff. So what's your view of the type of leadership that is?
So of course, Elon Musk is an incredibly successful business leader. And I'm not within Twitter, so it's hard for me to have all of the facts. But the way I think about it is that your first days as a leader, whether it's at the head of a company or in a new job, you're going to signal a lot about your purpose, your principles, and your values. And looking at it from the outside, I would ask a couple of questions, right? What does it signal to put, I think it's $13 billion of debt on a company that has $5 million in revenue and is losing money? What does it signal? And what does it signal on day one to fire half of the people without even taking the time to understand what they do? And then realizing a day later, apparently, oh, oops, Mary, would you please come back? It's like treating people like commodity, disposable items. So I'm sure there's more context to this than I can understand, but for me, the implication, I'm not here to give a lecture to Elon Musk, but is what messages, what do we say in our first days as a leader in any new context, right? That would be the question I would ask.
Okay, so that will lead me to my last question, but I think it's a very fundamental one that we actually share. But it's true that if you take that example, if Elon Musk is successful, we may fear that this type of strategy is going to be shared in business cases at Harvard School and other schools. And I'm not sure it's what we wish for, because I think indeed protecting people is also part of the job of a leader in the organization. So I would like to finish maybe this interview by asking you, what's the next chapter for you, Hubert? And how do you want to use your life now after the experiences you've had, after what you're writing, and your involvement with education and all that?
And before I answer, just one more word about Elon Musk. Let's even imagine that he's widely successful, at Twitter. That doesn't make him a role model, right? And I think a key decision we all get to make is, what kind of a leader do I want to be? And the principles that I talk about in the heart of business, I wouldn't even assert that they are the best, absolute best way to lead. That's the way I have chosen to try to lead. And I think it's for each one of us to decide, what kind of a leader we want to be. Now, to your question, so 2 or 3 years ago, I decided to pass the baton of the leadership of Best Buy to an amazing woman, Corey Barry, who's doing a fabulous job, right? Bigger round of applause from the Best Buy table to Corey Barry. And at that time, I made 3 decisions. One, I was not going to move down to Florida to play golf with aging white men, because I don't play golf, right? So that would have been stupid. B, I didn't want to be a CEO anymore, because I had done that arguably for 15 or 20 years. Enjoyed it very much, but there's a time for everything. And then the third decision was I want the next chapter to matter. I feel that 60 is the new 40. And so I thought it needed to matter. And upon reflection, I thought that my calling in that next chapter was to help the next generation of leaders, become who they could become. So I thought that HBS was a good platform to do this. So that's now my principal activity is to be a member of the faculty at Harvard Business School. And my key focus there is all about leadership. So in the MBA program, I teach a course called Authentic Leader Development, which was created, I think, about 15 years ago by Bill George, my good friend. And then I'm involved in a number of executive education program for CEOs and senior leaders. And there's a table of Ralph Lauren. We've got the pleasure of having some of the Ralph Lauren executives attend, be part of that journey. It gives me immense joy to, use all of my scars, right, to help the next generation of leaders deal with what is indeed a challenging environment. And I think when we think about this environment, where there's so many reasons to be pessimistic, whether it's because of, climate change, societal issues, racial inequity, health issues, a recession, many, many reasons to be pessimistic. And as leaders, I think we have a choice. Option one is we surrender and we say, we just failed, it's not going to work out, it's the end of the world. You agree? Option two is say, well, we'll try to do something, but for the most part, it's we're going to try to do the same thing we've done before, which of course is try to hope for a different outcome is the definition of madness. And the third option is to say, yes, this is a challenging context, but this can be our finest hour. This is our opportunity to do our best to create a future that does not exist yet, but that can be better than what we have today. That's a choice we get to make.
Great. Well, that's a great conclusion. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I should stay up? Okay.
Thank you. Can I put this back?
Broke my ankle here. It's great to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, don't.
Is that you in pain?
No, not at all.
Oh, but
I'm
you broke it.
Yeah,
No,
a while
stable.
ago.
Okay.
Don't worry, Fred. Not
Okay. All right.
Hello, beautiful people. It's great to see all of you, each of you. And thanks for the help on the stage. 60 may be the new 40, but I'm sure that 40 is the new 80. So I am Darren Isom, and I, as a member of the Sciences Po American Foundation Board of Directors and a Sciences Po graduate, class of 1999, I am both honored and delighted to present tonight's Stanley Hoffman Award. The Sciences Po American Foundation established the Stanley Hoffman Award in 2018 to honor Professor Hoffman's legacy as a visionary of international relations and a renowned public intellectual. A Sciences Po graduate and a longtime professor at Harvard University, Professor Hoffman embodied the standard of Sciences Po's ideals, to strive for excellence and pursue meaningful, widespread impact on society. With this award, the Sciences Po American Foundation seeks to recognize the exceptional efforts of individuals who have, in the spirit of Professor Hoffman, contributed to international affairs through business and policy making, and in doing so have demonstrated Sciences Po at its best. But first, a few words on the impressive legacy of Stanley Hoffman. Although Hoffman built his career up in Cambridge at Harvard University, as one does, studying and writing about international affairs in a way that both enriched academia and informed public intellectual life and culture from 1955 to 2015, he remained un Français de cœur, a French at heart, leveraging his sense of place and belonging in France to anchor his worldviews, his keen political analysis and his understanding of leadership in all things that mattered. And while I'm sure his time spent at Sciences Po in the late 40s, Autour de la Péniche, fostered his love for Paris and for France, it was surely his love of Paris and France that allowed him to make the most of his time at Sciences Po. As a generous listener, a generous learner, and a generous leader. And to add a human touch to his intellectual titan, I'd love to read a note offered by Leah Pizar, a former student of his at Harvard. Stanley Hoffman was brilliant, devilishly funny and witty, but above all, marvelously kind and patient with his students. And while he had hundreds of disciples, he, of course, also had mentors. De Tocqueville's writings were his students' most dog-eared possessions, but his real master was Raymond Aron, from whom he learned that the duty of a professor is not to form students who would agree with everything that is said, but who could think for themselves, critically and creatively. Part realist, part idealist, Hoffman understood the nuance that modern leaders working in international contexts face. And perhaps above all, he urged us to believe that the mark of a great leader is simple, the ability for them to be decisive, a leader as first mover and catalyst. And with that, as proper inspiration, I turn to tonight's honoree. Hubert Joly has been described as a visionary and one of the most gifted leaders of our time. As CEO of Best Buy, he led a turnaround that many lauded as a case study that should be taught in business schools around the world. 15 years after leaving Rue Saint-Guillaume, his professional talents were applauded by the World Economic Forum at Davos, where he was named Global Leader for Tomorrow. Since then, his accolades have only mounted, from HBR to Barron's to Glassdoor, boardrooms, workrooms, lecture halls, and podiums all agree that he is a top thinker and a true force. Now a senior lecturer at Harvard Business School, I'm going to repeat all this stuff because it's worth repeating. He is a member of the board of directors at Johnson & Johnson and Ralph Lauren, a member of the International Advisory Board of HEC Paris, and a trustee of the New York Public Library and the Minneapolis Institute of Art. His book, The Heart of Business, is a playbook for leaders who are ready to abandon old paradigms and lead with a noble purpose. In it, he agitates for business to commit to diversity and inclusion to unleash human magic, unlock genius, and drive impact. Most importantly, he champions the critical role of the purposeful leader, and I quote you, "Today's leaders have to be purposeful, to be clear whom they serve, be conscious of what their true role is, be driven by values, and be authentic," what he calls the 5 B's of the purposeful leader. I'm reminded of the great writer and thinker, Bell Hooks, who said, "To be truly visionary, we have to root our imagination in our concrete reality while simultaneously imagining possibilities beyond that reality." For me, it is that anchored imagination that will forever connect Stanley Hoffman and Hubert Joly. So without further ado, I know that was a lot of ado, but I'm sure it was all merited. It's a delight to present the 2022 Hoffman Award to Hubert Joly.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Of course. We're friends. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.